Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we have a lot to discuss. Don't want to waste too much time because I have a very special guest for you guys today. We're going to be talking about the Missouri and Florida games, as well as some Bediako and Qayden Samuels news because this has been a very busy week in the world of Alabama basketball. But really quick here up at the top, got a couple of quick housekeeping things I want to take care of. One, if you're not subscribed to the channel, if you would do me a favor and subscribe, we'd really appreciate it. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Two, if you have not seen, shout out to CRob822 for joining a membership on the channel. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. We recently opened up the membership tier and going to be doing some more things for the members. So if you're interested in doing that, we would really appreciate it. And then last but certainly not least, I am a part of the Believe Podcast Network. So if you hear any ads on Apple or Spotify or any of the podcast networks, that's because I am a part of that network. And anything you could do to help out those sponsors, we would really appreciate. But don't want to waste too much time because I have a very special guest today. You may have seen me on his channel not that long ago, but I have Thomas Isaacs of the RollTide Rewind joining me today to talk Alabama basketball. How you doing today, Thomas?
I am doing swell. Sorry for the camera. The lighting in here is kind of bad. It's also 8 degrees outside, but I am ready to go.
Absolutely, yeah. Cold spell hitting the whole country. I'm sure you got affected by that one a little bit more than I did here in Tuscaloosa. Please let everybody know where they can find your channel and where they can find all the basketball coverage you have going on over there.
Yeah, absolutely. So my channel is the RollTide Rewind. We are at 798 subscribers, only 2 more to 800. But you can find us there on the YouTube channel. We do a lot of football film breakdowns, football highlight videos. Same thing with basketball. We're hitting it hard with basketball. A lot of film breakdown, especially with Charles Bediako now returning and hopefully changing the tide for the tide this season. And then you can also find me on Twitter, RollTide Rewind on Twitter. I try to post unique stats about Alabama from time to time on there. But yeah, that's where you can find me. RollTide Rewind on YouTube, RollTide Rewind on Twitter or X.
Yeah, and for anybody curious on that, I will have everything down in the show notes and linked in the YouTube channel. So if you're interested in that, check that out. I will say, as we kind of get underway, the first thing I wanted to talk about here on the show is you may have seen posted to my channel, or funny enough, his as well. The Alabama got its newest commitment in basketball today. Qayden Samuels made it official that he was committed to the University of Alabama. For those of you that may have missed it, this is one that had been kind of hinted at for quite some time. His mom actually even confirmed to Joe Tipton that he signed an early signing period. He was one of those guys that signed and just didn't make it official that he had signed. So he's a guy who Alabama's had locked in for quite some time. I posted a video on my channel. Thomas actually did a breakdown of some of his high school footage and posted some of his high school footage out on his channel as well. If you're interested in that, check it out. But what's kind of your immediate thoughts on what Qayden Samuels could really bring to the Tide?
I mean, first thing, he looks like he'd be a great high volume shooter, and that's what Nate loves to see out of his guards or forwards. And you can see in the highlight video that I made, he is so good at attacking the basket too. Not only is he great at pull up threes, at pick and rolls, he's able to get to the basket and be very violent with the ball, going up to the rim, drawing a lot of fouls, drawing a lot of contact, but also trying to get into the hoop and making the hoops. But I think it's a great setting for Nate. I think he has the potential to be a day one starter. Depending on what the roster looks like next year, obviously with the portal and everything, things change. But I love the commitment. He fits exactly what Nate wants in the offense. He's also a lefty. Reminds me a lot of, we had Mark Sears with that team in the Final Four team. He had 4 lefties on the team with Sears, Estrada, Mohamed Diobate, and then Sam Walters and Aaron Estrada. I think I said his name too. But yeah, it's I love it. I love the commitment. I think he's going to be a very great player for Alabama.
Yeah, and something, you kind of hit it on it. He's really good in the pick and roll. I think he was like a 1.23 points per possession in the pick and roll. He's elite there. His pull-up game is absolutely incredible. He's a really, really good shooter, kind of like you said. The big thing to note is he's got a 6'11" wingspan. So while the defensive stats don't jump off the screen to you, he's somebody that has the body and has the physicality to be a good defender. Unlike the Sam Walters where you talked about, right? Like Qayden Samuels has much more of the body to be able to be a better defender, right? Like he has the strength and the muscle and the build to be that guy. He also has a really, really high release, which I really like. He's somebody that I don't think would have an issue with getting his shot blocked. In my mind, he's a prototypical wing in NATO's system. Like he's going to be able to run anything from the 2 to the 4. Think about the way you have Amari Allen right now, maybe a more scoring oriented version of Amari. The big thing personally for me, and I said it in the episode, was in my mind, what he gives you that you don't exactly have right now, especially at the wing position. You have it at the guard with LeBaron, but you don't have a guy right now that if you needed a bucket in crunch time, he could just go get you one. And I thought that that's something that in moments in Nado's system, right? You saw it with Brandon, you've seen it with some others, but he's been able to just put a guy in ISO and say, hey, go get me a bucket. LeBaron can do that for you right now, but I think having a guy at 6'6" with that giant wingspan that can do that just gives you so much more versatility because of how physical they can attack the basket and what they can do for your offense. So I think just having that guy who can potentially play ISO and stuff is a really, really big deal, and I'm super excited to have him added to this Alabama roster.
Yeah, I can't wait for Qayden Samuels. I think he's going to be a great player, and depending on what the transfers we get, and then hopefully another 5-star out of the recruiting class. I won't say names, but if we get a few more, I like what we're going for next year.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the next thing I want to talk about today is actually a bit of an update. And for any of you who may have followed along on my live stream that I did on Sunday, you'll have a little bit of an idea where we're going on this one. This is an update in the Charles Bediako, TRO case because since we last recorded, a couple of things have happened. One, the first thing that happened was on Tuesday, or I guess on Monday, the NCAA's lawyer filed a motion to extend the TRO because she was going to be unable to get from Tennessee to Alabama. In my mind, I actually have some serious thoughts about this. Step one, if you're telling me that it's not important enough for you to get to Alabama, that in my mind is the NCAA not putting a ton of importance on this case. Because if Missouri was able to get here and so was Tennessee, then the lawyer should have been able to, especially if the NCAA considered this such a dire precedent that they need to get Congress involved. If Congress has to be involved, you should be able to make it a couple of states. I understand, or make it down a state. I understand that there was an unprecedented storm there, Nashville's under snow and things, but if this was that important, there were ways to get here, right? So I disagree with the notion of that. And then the second thing that happened, just before I get your thoughts, Thomas, is the judge in the NCAA case was asked to, or sorry, the NCAA filed a motion to have the judge recuse himself because he was a donor to the University of Alabama athletics and had donated over $100,000. And the funny part to me about that one is one, yes, it didn't have a ton of legal precedent. Recusal has plenty of reasons why people can be recused, but there was no specific legal precedent that you had to be recused because you were a booster. But when Bediako's lawyer, gave the defense, they were like, hey, sure, if you want him to recuse, no problem. The important part about that, and the reason I bring it up, is the lawyer in the Bediako case was Judge Roberts in the circuit court of Tuscaloosa, right? Or circuit court located in Tuscaloosa. He was the only lawyer, or only judge, I'm sorry, in the circuit court in Tuscaloosa that did not attend UA either undergrad or law school. The only valid argument that I see to this is technically UA is one of only a couple of law schools in the state. I do understand that. However, another judge has been assigned in this case, and that judge is Daniel Pruitt, who, hint, hint, went to undergrad at the University of Alabama. So, the only reason I even bring this up, this is not to say, and I had somebody in my mentions trying to say, oh, are you saying that somebody that went to undergrad at Alabama is now going to be, immoral or, unethical in this case? No. But I actually am saying at the same time, somebody that donated to Alabama wasn't going to be unethical either, right? At the end of the day, you're claiming someone is going to be unethical if you're asking for recusal. Recusal is on the basis of you're going to do something against what you normally would do. That's why I want you to recuse yourself. So I think it's a little funny to me. I'm sure that there are going to be fans of other schools that are going to hear that it's an Alabama judge and are going to be upset still. But at a certain point, you would literally have to make the entire circuit court system in Tuscaloosa recuse themselves, and that's just not going to happen. What's kind of your overall thoughts on this situation? I know it's been more legal mumbo jumbo than we wanted to get into, but what's kind of your general thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think you had said it in the chat the other day. Whenever they announced that they were going to delay it another 10 days, I think I was at work when they announced they were going to delay it for 10 days. And I just read it was because they couldn't get there due to weather. And my first thought was your thought too. I was like, if Missouri's basketball team can find a way to get from Missouri to Tuscaloosa, then an attorney in Tennessee who thinks this case, the NCAA thinks this case is very, very important. Obviously not important enough that they're going to let him play 3 more games. But yeah, it's just a lot of craziness. I thought it was hilarious that they got rid of the judge who was a UA donor, which whenever it got out that it was a UA donor, everyone lost their ever living minds. After they posted on Twitter everywhere, they lost their minds. Guess what they're going to figure out when they figure out this judge went to University of Alabama, and not only that, they are, I believe, was the judge in the Darius Miles case. So blows their minds. It's going to make them go crazy. But at the end of the day, like my thought process on it all is I'm obviously happy Bediako is back. I'm obviously happy that we get a big man to help with Aiden Sherrill. Now, overall, I think a lot of people would agree that we don't really like former professional players playing in college basketball, like with the Euro guys coming over, like Illinois' entire roster, it feels like was a former Euro all-star on a pro league. And then Njae for Baylor is what kind of started the climax of all of this. And then everyone has, lost their minds when Bediako hit the climax because he was I think the first one that actually was in college, declared for pro, and then circled and came back. But a lot of guys you can see are trying to do that. And then a lot of the G League at night guys are trying to come back. And kind of like when in college football, whenever Auburn in 2013 had that really good offense, and a lot of it was due to the RPO action, but the offensive linemen, were going 5 to 6 yards downfield and they were still throwing passes. Nick Saban was like, this is not what we want it to be. And everyone flamed him for it, saying he's making excuses because he can't defend it. Well, then 2018, 2019, 2020 come around. Alabama runs that offense. They average over 40 points per game, and they win a national title in 2020, and they run roughshod over every single team they played. So it's kind of a thing with Nate, and a lot of coaches have said it, and Nate said it. He said he doesn't like it. He doesn't like that the professionals are playing, but if this is how college basketball is going to go, that's what you need to do to be successful. It's like in college football. If you're not going to use the transfer portal to your advantage, why are you not using it? Your Indiana just won a national title because they had a lot of experienced dudes on their team. They weren't all the best players. They weren't all 5 stars in high school, but if you have a bunch of 23-year-olds on the offensive line going against, 3 18-year-old defensive ends, like 23-year-old's probably going to win, even if it's a 5-star defensive end. But I'll get away from the basketball talk. But yeah, I'm happy Bediako's back. I don't like the professional players playing in playing in college basketball, but if that's what they're going to allow, then that's what we have to do. And then the circuit judge thing, like I said, it's kind of funny to me, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think that, if you're curious on kind of my general thoughts on it, I thought the person that kind of put together the thoughts the best in that was actually Dennis Gates. Funny enough, the coach that Alabama just played against Missouri. But his thoughts, he was asked before the Alabama-Missouri game, actually, it was after the first game that Alabama played with Bediako against Tennessee. He was asked, like, hey, what's kind of your general thoughts on this? And to summarize, and I've tweeted out his thoughts. If you haven't watched it, I really recommend you doing so. But his general thoughts was like, hey, I played basketball, 20 years ago, and I played with professionals, and I've coached professionals. They just signed FIBA contracts instead of NBA contracts. I don't understand what the real problem is. And I thought that it was a very reasonable take, right? Like at a certain point, just because somebody is playing professional basketball, like we're splitting hairs about like, oh, this is the G League versus this is FIBA. I think all of us are in agreement. Hey, it probably shouldn't be happening. But the crazy part is, I think that what people need to understand is, even at the current moment, Nate was okay with, this was not even really considered until Najee's situation, like you talked about with the draft, because that was the first time someone had gone into the NBA draft and then come out. The European guys have been doing it for a while, so it was even considered weird for a while, the fact that you allowed European pros. And I think that's the thing that I think some people are getting lost on, is they're like, oh, y'all are using European pros as the defense. No, the European pros is just part of the reason why Najee got approved. And then Najee getting approved is really the defense, because he was drafted and then went Euro, right? Like, so there's multiple things that are kind of included there. Don't want to belabor the point. I know we've talked about it a lot, but I thought that, like I said, if you don't get a chance, really recommend that you check out Dennis Gates' thoughts on the topic. I thought that it was really, really well spoken. Really, recommend what he said as a coach. Thought it was very, very important. But don't want to waste too much time. Want to move over to the Missouri game. As I said, Alabama is able to take down Missouri by a score of 90-64. Honestly, this got a little bit more out of hand than I even expected. Anybody who was here, I predicted 92-78. I thought that what Alabama was able to do was kind of multifaceted. I thought that Alabama, just general thoughts. Alabama did a good job limiting the 3-point line. Mizzou just goes 4 of 21 from the 3-point line, 19%. They shot 34% from the free throw line on 23 attempts, which has got to be some of the worst free throw shooting I've ever heard of in my entire life. It was a situation where, Alabama was able to contain Mark Mitchell, which, as we had talked about, was going to be a very big key to this game. I think part of that was due to the fact that he just didn't have shooting around him. When Alabama's not concerned that they're going to be stretched out shooting the ball like they were last season. If you remember last season in Como, they were shooting like crazy. So Mark Mitchell was able to, dominate in the interior. Well, the difference in this game is they didn't shoot it great, and then Mark Mitchell wasn't able to be great in the interior. And then when you fouled him, he was atrocious at the line. So, I think some of those things kind of added to this. What's kind of your big takeaway when you're thinking about what Missouri did in this game before we moved to the Alabama side of it?
Yeah, I kind of thought about the game last year. Alabama, like last year, the big difference, I think a big difference between this team and last year's team on Alabama on the offense side is turnovers. Missouri capitalized very well off of turnovers last year. I think they had almost 60 points in the first half last year. They were just shooting lights out. I remember I was watching the game and I was with a friend and I was like, I mean, if they're not going to miss, there's just nothing we can do. That was a very different story this year. And like you said, the free throws was the craziest thing to me when I was looking at stats, kind of like with 5 minutes left in the game. I didn't really realize how bad they were at shooting free throws. I think at one point they were 7 of 21. And it just made me think about, I think it was either Nate's first year or Avery Johnson's last year. Alabama played Missouri at Alabama, and Missouri was a ridiculous, like 31 of 31 from the free throw line. And Alabama ended up winning the game, but I just remember that stat compared to now. And I just thought about, wow, times have changed. But no, Missouri they couldn't get the shots to fall. And I think with Mitchell, he takes up a lot of a presence. Everyone accounts for him. They know, like, we got to make him get the ball out of his hands. Well, last year it was great. Caleb Grill was there. You had all these sharpshooters that could get all these shots up. And this year they just don't have those guys this year. Now Missouri has won a few games. They beat Auburn. They beat Florida. They've beaten tournament teams. And Missouri's kind of like on that bubble where they're kind of like, I think up to Lenardi, they're like the first 4 out. So they're on like a bubble, like are they last team in, or are they one of the first 4 out, next 4 out? So it's not a bad team at all. But last night was just not their night. And that's offensively, defensively. We'll get into Alabama in a second, but yeah, it just was not their night.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of the mindset this Missouri team's probably an NIT team. I know they're currently sitting at 4-4. They started the SEC season with a big win against Florida and Kentucky, but I honestly look at those as more of the anomaly, not the rule. I personally think that they're going to have to be more like 10-8 in conference, maybe even 11-7 in conference to make the NCAA tournament. They only have a win over Minnesota in the non-conference. They played an atrocious non-conference slate. I mean, they lost to Notre Dame, Kansas, and Illinois, but Minnesota was the only other team they played inside the top 250. So, I mean, their non-conference was just really, really bad outside of the teams that they lost to. They don't have any real marquee wins in the non-conference. I mean, the strength of schedule is okay. It's not terrible, but it's from a non-conference strength of schedule is 355 out of 365. So, I mean, it's bottom 10 in the country for a non-conference strength of schedule, which is just atrocious. You also have to look at the fact that I thought that, you talked about them not having quite as many sharpshooters, and I think that's a true statement. But I think that the strange thing about that is they do have 2 guys that are solid sharpshooters in Jacob Cruz and Jaden Stone. Alabama just didn't let Jacob Cruz get off a ton of shots, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jacob Cruz only got off 2 shots from 3. Jaden Stone got off 4. You will live with giving their 2 best 3-point shooters 6 shots out of their 21. Stone made 2 of their 4 3-pointers, and then Nate even talked about T.O. Barrett. He's not a great 3-point shooter, and they were going to just let him live at the 3-point line if he wanted to. It was kind of lucky that he hooped him in, is what kind of Nate said. He was like, you just live with those. But I think that is the big thing, like you talked about, not having a guy like Caleb Grill. Because I think the thing that Grill gave you is a guy that was going to take the shot no matter what. It was kind of like almost the John Petty standpoint. Like, he was not going to go a game taking 2 threes. Like, he was taking 4 or 5 no matter what. And the fact that Cruz was limited, had 4 points in this game and only took 2 3-pointers, I thought was a big deal on the Alabama side of what they wanted to do on offense, or sorry, wanted to do on defense, is they limited the guys who they wanted to limit from a 3-point range. And, at the end of the day, that's part of the reason why Missouri shot so poorly from three, because they were picking who was taking those shots. I mean, additionally, it's a guy like Trent Pierce took four. Trent Pierce does not need to be the guy who, you don't generally think he's going to miss four shots. He's like almost a 40% shooter. So that's a little bit abnormal, but I do think that Alabama did a good job funneling those shots to who they thought weren't going to make them.
Yeah. I looked at the thing earlier because I noticed Missouri had 65 or 64 points. It was 64 points, I think. But the last time Alabama held an SEC opponent to under 65 was January 9th of 2024. Do you remember who it was against, Owen?
Mississippi State, maybe?
Not a bad guess. South Carolina, who was, I think, undefeated at the time. They scored 47 points.
Oh, that was the South Carolina team that went like 13-0 and played nobody. Mm-hmm. I remember exactly.
74 to 47 was the final score.
Yeah. I mean, this is a situation where, I think, as we kind of shift over to the Alabama side of this, I think that the first place you want to start is with what Nate said in the post game and what Aiden Sherrill said in the post game. And in the post game, he was asked about like what was kind of the emphasis in this game, and he thought that the biggest difference in this game versus some others is he thought that they prepared in a way to win this game in a way that they maybe had not prepared in the past, where like they won the game in the preparation, not in the actual play on the court. He thought that the defensive game plan was something that they had done a better job of in this one. They emphasized it more. They made sure they knew it top to bottom. He even used that as a reason why like a guy like Jalil Bethea didn't get in until the game was basically over, right? Like it was very clear that like the people that were playing the most minutes in this game was whoever was giving the defensive effort and the defensive intensity that it takes to win this game. That's what it was very clear to me. Also, the guys that are giving effort, you see a guy like Houston Millett, get 8 rebounds. Even though he only finished with 3 points and his 3 that he hit was in, garbage time, but he gets 8 rebounds and, just as a huge impact to what he does on the floor. People that are making winning plays is who he was going to play in this basketball game. I know some people maybe aren't as, maybe you want to see Jalil Bethea, maybe you want to see some others, but I thought that what Nate did in this one and how he emphasized it, I thought was a big deal. And I think the other big deal, and, we will talk about it, I'm sure, a ton, but I thought the other one is what this game did for you with Latrell Wrightsell. The fact that this is now a get-right game for him. Latrell had not really been shooting the ball well at all. Over the last few games that he had played, he was 2 of 6, 3 of 9, 1 of 7, and 5 of 15, 0 of 6. Against Arizona, he went 2 of 14. Against UTSA, he went 2 of 14. There were not really any games this season that he had shot the ball particularly well. He did pretty good against St. John's at 4 of 8. He did pretty good against Arizona at 3 of 6. But like most of the games shooting, Latrell honestly has not shot the ball well, and that leads to his percentage being as bad as it has been this season. But you blink, and now Latrell's over 30% from 3 again. He's at 32%. So, what's kind of your beginning thoughts before we get into the front court? Because I know I'm sure we're gonna want to talk about it a lot.
Yeah, I'll talk about the effort like you were talking about first. Like I know he gets a lot of hate, but Taylor Bowen, man, that man plays basketball. He may double dribble a few times, but he plays very, very hard. He had 10 rebounds. You mentioned Houston Millett had 8 rebounds. There's no like the 3 players that I see on the court that give the most effort is Amari Allen, Houston Millett, and Taylor Bowen. Those are the 3 guys I always see putting in the A+ effort that Nate intensifies. But like, yeah, Bowen, like he had 4 points. He was 1 of 7 from the field. Not great, but he had 10 rebounds. Nate's harped on him all year about rebounding the ball. He had, I think that's his first 10 rebound game that he's had. Millett had 8 rebounds. And then, yeah, I admire the effort out of those 2 guys. And then talking about Latrell Wrightsell, 21 points, 7 3-pointers. And then against Tennessee, he had 14 points, 2 of his best outings of the year. I was curious about the 7 3-pointers. He's the 9th player under Nate Oates to hit at least 7 or more threes in a game. The list includes Mark Sears, who's done it 4 times. Jaden Shackelford did it 3. John Petty did it 3 times. Brandon Miller did it twice. Chris Youngblood did it twice, both against Mississippi State. Aiden Holloway's done it once. Keon Ellis has done it once. Latrell Wrightsl's done it. And then also Beetle Bolden has done it one time. Wild stuff. When I saw the Beetle Bolden stat, I thought that was hilarious. Cole will get a kick out of that when he hears this. But no, if Trelley's hot, this team is such a different team. I know we'll talk about Bediako and how that makes a different team, but no, if Latrell Wrightsell is on his game, this team is totally elevated their ceiling. I think he's the most important player on this basketball team. When he's on his game, that changes things, because like even in the Final Four year, I know he didn't play the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games, but like in the games beforehand, when he and Mark Sears were on their game from three-point land, they can just, like, even though the defense was really, really bad, you can't stop those guys. And I think Latrell Wrightsell, if he can just keep this percentage going, keep this high volume status going well, I think that changes a lot of fortunes for Alabama.
100%. I think that it absolutely does. I think that also that sort of guy, getting a guy like Aiden Holloway back, I thought that he was going to shoot the ball a little better, especially when I saw him hit his first three of the game. It's like, oh, well, Holloway's going to have a great game. And it just, you could tell the wrist wasn't quite 100%, which you knew was a possibility. But the fact that he gives you 8 assists, that's what having another guard on the floor gives you. And that's what you were missing against your loss against Tennessee, right? Like, you just didn't have the ball movement. You didn't have the ball popping quite to the level because Trelley was having to play more lead guard, with LeBaron. The other thing that I will say that's a big deal in this game as we kind of move to the front court, and I know you talked about Bediako, but like Bediako gets the start in this game. Alabama is without Amari Allen for one more game. I would fully expect him to, this is kind of a preview of the preview. He will play in the Florida game. I would be absolutely shocked if he did not play in the Florida game. So we will, plan to assume he is going to play in that one. But the fact that he doesn't play in this one, so Alabama rolls out 3 guards with LeBaron, Trelley, and Aiden Holloway, and then Aiden Sherrill at the 4, Charles Bediako at the 5. This is something that if you listen to the pregame press conference, actually, that Nate did the day before the game, it sounded like this was something that was definitely they had thought about and was going to be a possibility, because he thought that Mark Mitchell matched up really, really well with Aiden Sherrill. The part of the issue was last season, the 4 was really more done by a guy like Muhammad Diabate and Grant Nelson, and that's where Mark Mitchell really had more success. But when Aiden Sherrill or a big man really got on him, they were able to contain him much more. And I think that that's really, credit to what Aiden Sherrill's been able to do in the post. Obviously, Bediako has been really, really good. His presence is obviously felt, and we can talk about it as well. But like, I thought the fact that you can have Aiden Sherrill really locked down, who has been their best player and best scorer in Mark Mitchell, is a really, really big deal, and shows, that he can defend more than just the post. And that's what Bediako allows him to do. He talked about it in the post game that, having Bediako allows him to slide out to the perimeter a little bit. You're seeing a few more 3-pointers out of Aiden, which he's capable of. You're seeing a little bit more ball handling out of him, which he's capable of. And you're seeing some more, offensive skill talent out of Aiden, which you don't always see when he's inside in the post.
Yeah, I love like when Bediako and Sherrill are playing together, or even if like Aiden's off minutes with Bediako's being able to come on the court in relief is such a difference. But like, I think a big part of this is also, I don't know, but like Bediako, this is a better version of Bediako that we had, in the Brandon Miller years. I feel like, I know it's been 2 games, but he looks like such a different player. He's offensively he's been good. Like, whenever the Brandon Miller team, like, he would have a few dunks every now and then. He was good on offense, but you knew him as like, that's Chuck, that's his paint. On defense, that's his paint. On offense, he's been doing great. 14 points last time, 13 points the time before, 4 of 5 shooting, 5 of 6 shooting. He's been great. I think they both benefit each other, Aiden Sherrill and Charles Bediako both, because Aiden Sherrill's able to go outside more, and he was so willing to shoot the threes last game, like especially early in the game. He was letting it fire, kind of like how he did against Duke in the tournament game when he came in. They left him alone at 3, and he's like, I'm going to shoot it every single time, and Duke had to call a timeout. I know they won the game by 20, but it felt nice that we had a little run in the beginning. But no, they both benefit each other. That's what the biggest thing coming in was, I was like, how is Bediako going to benefit Aiden? But now I see that he's not only benefiting Aiden, but Aiden is also benefiting him. And you can see in Charles's game, he's been great on offense. Like Aiden's, I think, the better offensive player, but whenever Bediako came back, I was thinking, okay, the defensive side is now covered, even though Aiden is a pretty good defensive player. But no, they both benefit each other very, very well. So I'm very much happy with this addition of Charles Bediako. It makes me a little more happier for the Florida game in the season to come.
Yeah, I mean, and one thing you may not realize, and when you think about an offensive talent, it's absolutely accurate to say Aiden has, I think, more skills at his disposal on the offensive end. But from an efficiency standpoint, Charles, if you actually look at what he was, I have the KenPom numbers pulled up. Charles was 33rd in the country his freshman year in offensive efficiency, including 12th in 2-point percentage at just over or just under 70%. A lot of that's because there are a lot of dunks. There's a lot of above the rim type stuff, throwing lobs. But then the second year he was still top 100 and top 30 in those categories, right? So like he is a guy who has been elite kind of his whole career. But you're absolutely right. Over obviously both of those were over full seasons, but so far this season he's at a 174 offensive rating. To put it into perspective, his best season he was at a 124. So his offensive rating is just absolutely through the roof. A lot of that is obviously how well he's been from a dunks perspective. He's also 9 of 10 from the 3-point line, or sorry, from the free throw line, which is crazy. He was not at all considered a great free throw shooter when he was here at Alabama. Even that first game that he was back against Tennessee, some of the free throws were pretty rough, but the fact that he's 9 of 10 from the free throw line is just an added bonus. I thought that Bediako you're absolutely right? I think the big thing, and we'll talk about it more, I'm sure, in the Florida game, but like what he gives you and the fact that like you saw it in the Arizona game, I think is the time when you saw it the most. Aiden Sherrill, when he was in the game, did a decent job defending the paint, right? Did a decent job rebounding the basketball. However, he catches full body cramps. And then when Aiden Sherrill is no longer in that game, the game gets completely out of hand. It's ridiculous. It's like, what's going on? The fact that you have a guy in Bediako that you can slide in, that can be another drop defender in the paint, that can really match up with the other team's big man. Because unfortunately, I mean, we'll just come out and say it. Noah Williamson has not been that guy outside of the Kentucky game. Right, it's the only game all season where he looked like he knew how to play basketball. Every other game, it's been bad. And honestly, it was the thing that was limiting the ceiling of Alabama. If Williamson was the guy you saw against Kentucky every game, then we wouldn't even be having this discussion. Like it would be like, oh my gosh, you got 3 big men. But the reason why this is such a big deal is we were at such a detriment of playing small. Like when you were playing small ball, you were either playing Taylor small ball 5, Keaton small ball 5. Obviously, he's injured now. Or you just had to go like crazy small ball. And the fact that you can now actually throw Chuck out there and keep a 5-man out there on the floor is so important to what we like to do on defense, and makes your defense so much better, because we were just giving up so much size in the interior that anytime Sherrill was not on the floor, you were just at a negative every single time, anytime he wasn't on the floor, because you just couldn't defend the post.
It reminded me a lot in when Nate's first year, whenever Kyra Lewis would sit on the bench, how the offense would forget how to do anything. And same thing when Colin Sexton's year, when he would go to the bench, they would forget how to play basketball. It's kind of what I feel like when Aiden Sherrill sits on the bench, the backup postman that we have. It's not good. Whenever he sits on the bench, you kind of sit there and go, hopefully we don't have a -10 in this period, -12. Let's get him back on the court. But yeah, Charles adds another layer to this team. But like you said, I think we've kind of missed on this, not necessarily missed on the entire portal class, but I think Bo Bowen is a good get, but the other 3 haven't panned out quite yet. Keaton Bristow did have his moment against Illinois where I thought he was a dog. He was a dog in that game, at least. And then Noah Williamson's Kentucky game, that'll be remembered for a long time. I don't know how to describe that other than like, you're going to just look back on it and go, that's the Noah Williamson game. And you're like, oh, did he hit a buzzer beater? I'm like, nope. He played basketball. He looked good playing basketball. Is what you're going to remember it as. But now Charles adds another layer to this team. Like Aiden can sit down and Bediako can be out there. And I think if Bristow can get healthy, that is a great thing as well, because I think in a way we are, I know he in his last few games that he played was not as good, but we are missing like another body that we can also throw out there too. So that'll be nice when we get him back. But also Amari Allen as well. Amari Allen is our best rebounder statistically. If we can get him back too, hopefully, like you said, by the Florida game, I think that also changes our fortunes as well.
Yeah, and one of the last things where you were kind of talking about, I think it's really important for people to realize when you're talking about like the difference in what's such a big deal is prior to Charles Bediako, what we were running into is like when you think about the Final Four team, right? I think the Final Four team is the best example of what we have for this. When Nick Pringle was on the floor, the team was pretty good. However, when Nick Pringle came off the floor and you had to slide Grant Nelson for the five, the team was still fine, right? Because Grant Nelson was a serviceable five. He was not a natural five, but he was a serviceable five. Notice I'm not talking about Muhammad Wagi. That's because Muhammad Wagi actually averaged more fouls per 40 minutes than Noah Williamson, which is saying a lot. Muhammad Wagi was
Crazy.
averaging 10 fouls per 40 minutes. Noah Williamson's currently at about 9.1. But both guys foul just entirely too much, and you can't rely on them for any serious length of time. Now, are they capable at certain moments? Sure, but it just can't be somebody that you're going to rely on for large stretches of games. And I think that's again what Chuck gives you. It just gives you another five because what we don't have on this team is a four like Grant that can actually slide into the five, right? Like you don't have that big time forward that has the huge body that can slide into the five and be serviceable. Whereas Grant Nelson was able to do that, right? Like you saw what he was able to do against North Carolina in the NCAA tournament, right? Like he was actually able to be a legitimate five in that game. Even though he was undersized at the five, he still was able to fight and give you what you needed. And again, Chuck being that for us is just such a big deal. I agree on the Keaton front. Would love to get him back as soon as possible, but I think that this game really like is getting more and more close to what we're going to look like healthy. And I think that additionally, what you have to understand and what I've been very adamant about is once I see what this team looks like, both with Aiden Holloway and Amari Allen, I think you're going to get a good taste of it in the Florida game, especially since we have a Tuesday to Sunday, which is a very big deal. I think having the initial game on Tuesday and then the Florida game on Sunday, I think that's a massive deal because that gives extra time for recovery. And I think it also, Nate even talked about it with a guy like Taylor or a guy like Aiden Holloway. The fact that they can just get more healthy, I think, is a big deal. But additionally, even if Amari Allen, if he was borderline able to play on Tuesday, then he could potentially even get some practices in before Sunday. Whereas if it would have been like a Wednesday to Saturday situation, if he's borderline able, he's not even going to get a practice in. He may get a walkthrough at best in before the game time. But I think that because of the time situation, Alabama may get very lucky and not only get Amari Allen back, but get Amari Allen back with a practice included, which would be just added benefit.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too with the Sunday thing. Now it'll be difficult next week. I think we have a Sunday, Wednesday, and then a Saturday, and the team we play on Saturday has a week off, Auburn. But this week specifically, we definitely get the needed rest that we need. But we need the guys back, like you were saying, because like how I described it to a few people was that do you remember in the 2020 the football team whenever there would be a few plays a game where Devontae Smith would be guarded by a linebacker. And it wasn't because it was done on purpose. It was because of how they were doing coverage, how Alabama lined up. That's just who ended up being on them. And every time it happened, Alabama always exploited it. Like it was never be a time where it's like, oh my God, you see it on the replay? Devontae Smith was guarded by a linebacker. You saw it because Alabama threw the ball to him every single time it happened. That's what happens when Noah Williamson is on the court and someone is going to be guarded by him. That's what happens every single time. Like he came in just in the Missouri game, they attacked. And it wasn't like he wasn't giving effort. It's just he just hasn't been as good. And I feel like that's what I've noticed a lot when he's in the game. It's just they're going full attack mode. The only game it didn't work was Kentucky. Like I said, that game will be remembered forever as the Noah Williamson game. But any other game, there's just been full attack mode. So glad, hopefully, get one guy back against Florida and hopefully get Bristow back. I don't think Davion Hannah or Collins are going to be able to probably return this year, but the other two guys, we can hopefully get them back soon.
Absolutely, yeah. So, want to move over to the Florida game because we've kind of hinted at it a little bit, and don't want this episode to go too crazy long. I know it's going to be a longer one just because we have more to discuss, but
Mhm.
want to talk about Florida. My initial kind of gut instinct, for anybody unaware and who've never seen the channel, I look at a team and I first open up their KenPom page. I know that KenPom and just statistics is not the whole picture. So I don't use that as just gospel, but I think it gives you a good idea, especially this far into the season, of who is a team, what's their identity, what do they like to do, especially in comparison to years past, right? So this season, Florida is a couple of things, absolutely. They are an elite rebounding team. They are number 2 in the country in both offensive and defensive rebounding rate. They are a terrible three-point shooting team. I'm talking atrocious. They are bottom 15 in the country at 28.5% on the season. Because of that, they actually don't shoot a ton of threes, which is something that's different than last season. Last season, they were a team that actually took a lot of threes, but because their rate is so bad, they just don't even take that many this year. And then the other thing that they're also very, very good at is they limit the three-pointers and they limit your assists, right? They're really, really good at limiting both threes attempted and assists. Most of the points that you actually score on Florida is from the 2-point land. The question becomes, why do they do that? All you got to do is look at Florida's roster and see who they're playing. They play Thomas Houck at the 3 at 6'9". They play Alex Condon at the 4 at 6'11", or I guess 4/5, and then Chinyelu at 6'10". Their front court is huge, and they want to funnel you into the interior. So they know that, hey, that's where their defenders are, so that's where they're going to have. I think that goes back into what I consider kind of my biggest question and what I kind of will open this game discussion about with you. Do you think that the success of the Alabama-Florida game is going to hinge partially on the ability of Charles Bediako to A, give us an additional post defender, and B, be able to give us an additional, just body in the interior, on top of what Florida has as an elite front court?
This was my big concern going, like, even after in the middle of December to January. I have the numbers right here. When we played Purdue, Gonzaga, and Arizona. So Purdue has Oscar Clough, Trey Kaufman-Wren. Gonzaga has EK and a lot of other good players. Arizona has Toby Awaka, Koa Pete, and then all the other good players they have. Alabama in those games averaged 32 rebounds. They averaged 7.7 offensive rebounds in those games. The opponents averaged 50.7 rebounds and 20.3 offensive rebounds. So a 18 rebound edge and a 13 offensive rebound edge. So when I looked at the SEC schedule, first thing I saw was Florida, and because we have to play every SEC team, but when we played the Florida game, I dreaded it for so long. They have Thomas Howell, 17.4 points per game, 6.7 rebounds per game. Alex Condon, 13.4 points per game, 8.1 rebounds per game. Ruben Chinyelu, I think, has been probably one of the most improved players in the country, 11.9 points per game, 11 rebounds per game. And then that doesn't even include Han Lockton, who's also a great serviceman to have on the bench, who could start on a lot of other basketball teams. But I was very much dreading this game for a really long time because after watching the Arizona Purdue games, we were out rebounded by like 25 rebounds. I was just like, this is all that game's going to be. They're going to miss a three. They're going to rebound it, dunk it like every other possession. But having Bediako changes things. That's another body. That's a body you can throw at Ruben Chinyelu. I think Sherelle matches up a lot better with Condon than he does Chinyelu. And that's what I was actually worried about because I thought you have to put Aiden Sherelle on Ruben Chinyelu. But now you can throw a 7-foot Bediako at him, and that changes things for Alabama. And then you can put Amari Allen on Thomas Hall. How has the height advantage, but Amari Allen is a very aggressive player. I don't think the height advantage is going to be such a mismatch for him. But yeah, it's going to have to be a thing where Alabama is going to have to force their guards to win the game. So, like, you don't want Ruben Chinyelu, Thomas Howell, and Alex Condon. Like, I expect them three to be the biggest volume for them. But you kind of want to put a lot of it in the hands of Boogie Flan and Xavier Lee. Now, before the season, I thought I would be crazy to say that as an answer. Like, give it to Boogie Flan, let him win the game. And I would be like, well, yeah, he's a good basketball player. Like, why would I want him to try to win the game? Well, he and Xavier Lee have been underwhelming for Florida, considering last year you had Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, Will Richard. Walter Clayton was averaging 38.6% from three, 35% for three for Martin, 35.9% for Richard. And then you have Boogie Fland, who is 19.5%, 19.5%. Xavier Lee, 28%. Very much different for Florida. That's the main difference of why they're not, last year they were a 1 seed. Now they're probably projected 5 seed. That's the biggest difference is guard play. And I think that's what it's going to have to be is Alabama's going to have to limit their bigs to force their guards to have to make plays. And I think Auburn did actually a really good job of that last Saturday at Gainesville. They put a lot of the game in Boogie Flan's hands, and also just very much they were strategic with their matchups. Alabama does this thing a lot where people kind of get upset when Alabama leaves a lot of guys wide open on purpose. Like they did that have done that years for Nate Oates, but they'll leave certain players open on purpose because they know they're like, he's not a good 3-point shooter. If he hits the 3, we'll live with it because he's certainly not going to hit it again. Alex Condon is 6 of 42 from 3. He has shot it 42 times. They've let him shoot it 42 times, and he's made 6 of them. That's an insane number. 14% is an insane number from 3, especially a 42 3-point shots. So I think what Nate's probably going to do, he's done this before, when Condon gets the ball at the top of the key, maybe for a pick and roll action to start, Aiden Sherrill is going to be sitting 15 feet away from him hitting the mid-range line. He's going to be sitting there at the free throw line, backed up probably a few more steps, just kind of be like, I'm waiting for you. Like I'm going to let you decide what you want to do. And if Condon shoots open threes, that's exactly what I want to see. I don't care if he makes 1 or 2 of them. Like, let him shoot it. Let him have it. That's a wasted possession for Florida. We have to rebound the ball. And I think having Bediako and potentially Amari Allen back helps us out. I'm not saying Alabama needs to win the rebound battle. You just have to make their guards do more than they have to do. Because I trust our guards much more than I trust Florida's guards. Do I trust Florida's front court more than ours? Absolutely. I think it's the best front court in the country. But with a guy like Bediako, that helps us out a lot. Because I think the Noah Williamson minutes are going to be very critical in this game as they need to be limited. And I think Bediako is going to be the biggest key to that.
Yeah, and kind of a couple of things you touched on. So first things first, 100% agree. And I think that the thing that immediately jumped off the page at me when I see a team that's such a good rebounding team is let's look at some of their losses. Did the team that beat them just, match them on the rebounding battle? And Auburn's a great example. You just talked about they went into Gainesville and won at Florida. They lost the offensive rebounding battle 17-8. And then they actually won the defensive rebounding 24-22. So they lost the rebounding battle by 7, including the offensive rebound battle by 9. Auburn did not rebound the ball particularly well. I mean, they were okay, but they weren't great. Florida still got their own on the rebounds. And exactly like you said, I mean, Auburn didn't shoot the lights out. I mean, they shot 33% from 3. They were 53% from inside the arc. I mean, fine, but not elite. They had 9 steals, which that was a very big deal. They did force a lot of live ball turnovers, and a lot of that speaks to the fact that, Condon's been turning over the ball a little bit. Xavier Lee has just been, he's not been what Florida expected him to be, given what they paid for him and, getting him to transfer from Princeton. He has not been the guy that they would have expected. You're absolutely right. I think that Chinulu is, one of the big difference makers in this team. A stat that I found is quite funny. In the LSU game, he had a triple-double of sorts. He had 15 points, 11 offensive rebounds, and 10 defensive rebounds. Just absolutely an animal on the glass. You're absolutely right in terms of how big a deal he's been and how much he's improved his percentages. Last season, he was around a top 100 defensive rebounder, top 50 offensive rebounder. This season, he's 7th in defensive and 10th in offensive. And keep in mind, those percentages went up by about 5% each. So, he's getting a substantial amount more offensive and defensive rebounds this season. A really, really big deal to what they like to do on the rebounding front and what they just like to do overall as a team. Having a matchup for Chinulu is honestly, like you said, like Aiden Sherrill was going to have to match with Chinulu just because he was the only big that you felt confident could do it. You can't go small ball 5 with, or have Amari Allen or somebody on him. He would dominate. You can't really have Noah Williamson. He would feast. So this matchup for Florida, kind of like, as you said, with how many bigs that they have, the fact that they run Condon and Chinulu at the same time, Alabama needed another guy that could rebound. And I think that having and have the size in the post. And I think having Bediako is such a big deal in this game. It just gives you so much that you weren't going to have coming into this game. Do I think that immediately means you win the game? Maybe, maybe not. But I think that at a minimum, it increases your likelihood of winning the game from like somewhere in the maybe 20% range to somewhere around a coin flip on winning this game. Because I think that it just allows you to match in the post that much better. I agree with you. I think that Amari Allen can match with Thomas Houck. I'm not concerned that Amari Allen's given up about an inch of height. I think that Amari gives enough fight that's a big deal. I also would not be surprised if you see some lineups that Alabama trots out there that are like Aiden Holloway, LeBaron Philon, Taylor Bowen, Aiden Sherrill, and Charles Bediako, right? So where you're even putting some additional height on Thomas Houck, I could definitely see that. The benefit that has is you actually have Aiden Holloway back to match up where you didn't have him in that Tennessee game. And I think the benefit of having another passer, another penetrator on offense, another shooter is a very big deal. Not to say that Latrell can't do it, but I think that Aiden obviously gives you a little bit of burst from the guard spot that Trelly just doesn't. So I think that potentially you're going to see some lineups in this game that don't suspect that every lineup you see in this game is what Alabama's going to do for the rest of the season, because Florida has a very, very unique style and system and a very unique skill set with their players. And Todd Golden plays the guys who he plays. And this is the other thing I wanted to get into is that his bench minutes, he does not play his bench. Like, this is an 8-man rotation, and it is very clearly an 8-man rotation. The guys who you're going to see are the 5 starters that we've talked about. Urban Clavzar is their backup guard. He's been their best 3-point shooter at 36% on the season. Micah Henlogden, their backup center, and Isaiah Brown, one of their backup 2 guards. That's it. That is their whole lineup. He has not played in most games. He has not played anyone else unless it's been an absolute blowout. He doesn't matter if they have 2 fouls or not. He just keeps them playing. So Florida is a very specific team to look at in what they do, and they try to do it, to the best of their abilities. But honestly, this game is going to come down to the success that Alabama has on the rebounding battle and how much, as you said, how much they're able to force the guards to beat you and keep it out of the hands of the big men. Because I was in attendance for that SEC tournament game last season, and it got ugly very, very quickly. Obviously, part of that was just due to how much shooting they had on the court. That's the big difference in this year's team and last year's team. They thought they would have a lot of shooting with Xavier Lee and Boogie Flan, and they just don't. When you got 2 guys that are sub 30%, that's a problem, and that's why Clavzar has been such a big deal. And I think, honestly, Clavzar, if you were to point to one guy that's actually the X factor in this game, Clavzar is probably that guy. The only game that they won that he didn't really have a great one was the Vandy game, but in pretty much every other game, and I think that was because they have so many big men that Vanderbilt just couldn't contain them. But in every other game that Florida has really been successful, Urban Clavzar has been a very big deal in it. He went 2 of 8 from 3 against Auburn, and they really need him to have a lot of success shooting to stretch the floor because they just don't have much outside of him.
Yeah, I remember the Vanderbilt game. He wasn't really on his game, but he's had great games where he's come off the bench, like even against then the non-conference play, they played a tough schedule like Alabama did. They played against Duke, UConn, Arizona. They played against those teams, and most of those games he was delivering really good games for them. One thing I wanted to point out for Florida, though, is they get to the free throw line very, very well, and I think that's going to be an issue with our bigs is foul trouble. I think foul trouble could be the difference in this game. Florida's 15th in the country in free throw attempts per game. Ruben Shinulu is shooting a lot more free throws recently. From the stats that I saw, he's again, I think against Auburn, he shot maybe 10 free throw attempts. In the game before, he was shooting a lot as well, I think against Vanderbilt. But they get to the line very frequently. I think they're second in the SEC behind Auburn at getting to the free throw line. The difference between Alabama and Florida in this case is Alabama's 44th in free throw attempts, but Alabama shoots 76% from the line, whereas Florida is barely above 70% from the line. So I think that is something else to watch in this game is how often are we getting to the stripe, especially do we get a favorable whistle down in Gainesville? Is LeBaron getting to the line? Are we limiting their bigs from being fouling our bigs? Are us fouling their bigs? And Aiden Sherrill not getting into foul trouble like he was earlier in the year? Can we limit that? And how do we respond if that is the case with Aiden getting, his fouls? Are we playing Bol Bolin more at the 4 than at the 3 and keeping Amari Allen at the 3? Kind of like, how do we respond to these fouls? So that's going to be something to watch that I wanted to mention before I stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing, when I look at the conference only stats, a couple of things when you're talking about good on bads, like some of the key matchups, the big one is the offensive rebounds, right? Like Alabama in conference only play is currently rebounding the ball on offense at about 30%, whereas Florida's getting the ball at 42% on offense, obviously. So that's a huge deal. And then Florida, again, number one on the sorry, that's for defensive rebounds. And then on the other side of the ball, they're getting it for 24% versus 32%. So, right, they're just a substantially better rebounding team than Alabama. They're first in both categories, whereas Alabama's 12th and 8th in conference only. So, at a minimum, Alabama's going to have to step it up in this game to, as we said, I don't think that they need to win the offensive rebounding battle or the rebounding battle in general, but I don't think that they can be dominated, right? This can't be a situation of like what you saw in the Purdue or Arizona or Gonzaga games, like you mentioned at the top of the show. You just can't get dominated to that level. I think that obviously if you had Bediako in some of those other games, maybe they look differently. So I think that, you have a lot to look forward to, but you're absolutely right. This, at the end of the day, even if you have Bediako, if him and or Aiden Sherrill get into foul trouble, you're still going to have the same problem you would have had that you only have one big, right? Like Noah Williamson maybe is going to give you something. I think that his minutes really for Alabama's success in this game need to be limited. If you want to have a lot of success in this game, unless he just has a crazy game that we're just not aware of. I'm very curious to see what happens in this one. As you mentioned, Florida is very well tested. They've played a lot of good teams. This team has, they lost to Missouri, then they lost to Auburn, so they are going to be coming off a loss. They have a few days to get right. Their last loss was at home, so I'm sure they're not going to want to lose back-to-back games at home, especially after Todd Golden talked smack about Bediako returning, which, funny enough, we haven't even mentioned at this point. But I think that this game is really going to hinge on what Alabama can do in the front court. I think that the fact that Florida is such a bad shooting team and the fact that Alabama is getting back some of its best shooters and getting into the best rhythm at the best time, I think is a really big deal. I think that Alabama is in a position to be able to knock off Florida, but it will, at a minimum, be a very good game. Really quick, I want you to give me who your player to watch is, who you think is going to be the most important player in this game, and it can be somebody we've already talked about, and then what your score prediction is going to be heading into Florida here. Obviously, knowing that they're actually playing at the time of this recording right now against South Carolina, so we won't know if they're immediately coming off a loss or if they've got right with a win against South Carolina.
Taylor Bowen is my player to watch. I think he has to be the X factor in the game because we're relying a lot on Bediako, a lot on Sherrill. LeBaron's an easy one to say because he's our best player. Amari Allen would be a good one to say because he's possibly coming back. Aiden Holloway hasn't had a good game in a little bit just because he's been hurt. I'm going to go with Bowen. How many rebounds can he get? Can he get 10 rebounds again? If he gets 10 rebounds, that changes the game for Alabama. He doesn't have to score a point. If he gets 0 points, 10 rebounds, and then maybe a block or two, that might be why Alabama wins the basketball game. So I'm going to go with Taylor Bowen as a player to watch. I'm going to give Florida the edge. I think Florida needs this game more than Alabama does, in my personal opinion. So I think they're just going to be a little more hyped up for it. I'm going to give Florida 88, Alabama 84 is what I'll go with.
Gotcha. Yeah. So my player to watch is, you mentioned him, but it's Amari Allen. My reasoning is obviously I think that his rebounding is a really big deal, but I also think the matchup with Thomas Houck is the most important matchup in this game. Everybody else on Florida gets all the credit, and like last season, even the guys that he played with got a lot of the credit. But if you look at the team last season, Thomas Houck was one of the most underrated guys on the team last season. He was 13th in the country in offensive rating last season, even with how good the guys who he had around him were. He's an elite rebounder. He's an elite, just glue guy. He does it all for this team. And so for me, the matchup with who is going to take on Thomas Houck, who is really going to limit his scoring. I mean, in the game against Auburn, he had 27 points. Obviously, they ended up losing the game, but he had 27 and 10. Thomas Houck is the guy that can really go for that any night. And I think that the matchup with both the guy you said and Taylor Bowen and the guy I said and Amari Allen, I think both of them are going to draw that Thomas Houck matchup. And the fact of the matter is that both of them are going to have to rebound the ball well. Both of them are going to have to defend well. And both of them are going to have to be able to take it and take the physicality to Houck because he's not afraid of the physicality. He's not going to back down from the fight. And I think that they're both going to have to take it to him. So I honestly think the success of Amari Allen and Taylor Bowen both, are going to be really the success of this game because I think that, you could live with Ruben Chinyelu potentially getting some rebounds, especially if you're limiting his ability to go back up with it and score off of that rebound. However, if Thomas Houck really gets going, I think he is the glue for this team. And if he gets going, it gets so many other guys on the team going. So I think that, the ability to limit him is really success in the limiting factor on this team. I also think you could even see some massive, massive lineups if Nate really had to, where you slide Amari Allen to the 2, play Taylor at the 3, and we could just go absolutely huge and put somebody massive like Amari on Boogie Fland. You're right. Like I think Amari just gives you that versatility because he can handle the ball well enough to give you another penetrator. So I really think that this is going to be a really good matchup. I have the score. I'm going to stick with my gut. I think that Bediako changes this game fairly substantially. Yes. But my gut coming into this was that Florida probably their front court. I have not seen us be able to take down their front court, even though their back court's poor shooting. I'm going to give Florida the slight edge. I think that if Alabama wins this one, it wouldn't surprise me at all. And if I knew for certain that, Florida was going to shoot as poorly as they have all season, if they were going to go to their averages, then I may choose it. Like if this game was in Tuscaloosa, I probably would pick Alabama to win it because I think that Alabama is good enough to win this game. But since it's in Gainesville, I'm going to give Florida the win. I'm going to go by a score of, I think it's going to actually be a little bit lower scoring because I think that there's going to be a lot of 2s in this one and a lot of like fighting for position. So I'm actually going to go, let's say 84-82. Florida is going to just eke it out in Gainesville. Like I said, if Alabama wins and the score was flipped, it wouldn't shock me at all. But that front court is so good that, until I see it, it's going to be tough to know. Really quick, want to get your last thoughts, Thomas, and let you plug your show. Let everybody know where they can find you. I really appreciate having you on today. I know it's been a long episode talking all things Alabama basketball, but I really appreciate it. Please let everybody know where they can find you and some of your last thoughts before we get out of here.
Yeah, I think this is a really big game between Alabama and Florida. I think this is probably a difference of a seed line bump for Alabama. I think everybody has Alabama around a 5 seed right now. You win this game at Gainesville against another potential 5 seed, that'll bump you up to a 4 seed line. And realistically, I think at Florida's one of the harder games we have left on the schedule. Like at Auburn will be tough, obviously. We do play Arkansas, but we get them at home. We go at Tennessee. But at Florida is one of the toughest games we have left. And I think if you can win that one, that's probably one of your best wins that you have of the season, bumps up that resume, that strength of schedule. So this is a big game for Alabama. I picked Florida mainly just because I think Florida needs it more than Alabama does. But because Alabama's been playing very injured, but if Alabama can see this one out, I think this is a very, very impressive win. But again, thank you for having me on the show, Owen. My show is the RollTide Rewind. You can find that on YouTube and also on Twitter at RollTide Rewind. We do basketball film breakdowns, basketball highlights, same with football. And if you're kind of interested in that, please hit a subscribe button. I think last time I checked, we were at 798 subscribers, so just 2 away from 800. I have a Qayden Samuels highlight video from today. Be sure to check that one out. We'll have some videos later this week on some football transfer portal film, so be sure to check that out as well. But yeah, thank you for having me on the show, Owen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me today, Thomas. I really appreciate it. As I mentioned at the top, if you're interested in any of the stuff he's talked about, I will have it linked down in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode.